Hello everyone, I'm Annie Gibbins and you're listening to Memoirs of Successful Women, the podcast where you get to hear candid conversations with fascinating women from around the globe who share aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure their success and what they have learned along the way. Hello and welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. Today we are going to have a deeper conversation because I'm introducing you to Gina Rolkowski, who is a trauma coach. And so we're going to be talking all things abuse. You know, it might be sexual abuse, it might be having suffering from someone who's been a narcissist in your life, dealing with issues of, shame, anxiety, fear. We're going to unpack all of that. We're going to do that through Gina, because Gina's also had a very strong lifetime journey through this before she became a trauma coach. So welcome to the program, Gina.
Oh, thank you for having me, Annie.
So talk us through what led you to be a trauma coach. We might just dive straight in. What do you think, gee, this is what I will specialize in?
Well, this August, I celebrated 18 years in recovery. And, lots of times people think of recovery as recovering from addiction or alcoholism. And I am a recovering drug addict, but I consider myself like in recovery from the causes of the addiction, sexual abuse. I had seizures for many years. I was in and out of psych wards, tried to commit suicide. So my recovery really encompasses overcoming the cause of the addictions and the seizures and all these different other things. And so the more I kind of went on my own journey, the more I realized that there is really some deficits, I guess is the best way to put it, in some of the healing work that can be done and the availability that I found. For example, like one of the biggest issues for me is having a faith element to healing, because it was a part of my 12-step journey as a drug addict. And when it came to like the healing from the sexual abuse that I experienced as a child growing up and working on that, there really wasn't a faith element as a part of like a quote unquote program. Mm. And so, and I was a teacher. And so I really had no intention of like being like a coach of any kind. It wasn't really like, oh, I can't wait to go and like do this. And I actually thought it was really trite, I guess is the word, like, oh, I've overcome trauma. And so like, I'm going to help other people. Yeah. I really didn't want it to be like that. I really wanted it to be from a place of where I really felt called to do this. And it was something that I wanted to do. And so when I was journaling one morning, I really felt like my program, the Bridge to Breakthroughs, came to me when I was praying one morning. And I really felt like this was something that I could develop. And I really felt God wanted me to lead in doing that. And it became it really just went from there. So that's really why I kind of stepped into that. And I do feel like when you have been through it, you really can. There's an element of really being able to relate to the experience of people who, women who, or anyone who's been abused, to be able to say like, I get it. Like, I really do get it. It makes a really big difference in the work that you do when you're healing.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It's not essential. There's plenty of people who are.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I know it made a big difference to me because, my therapist had her own trauma history. And, it's not like we sat around trading trauma stories. Like, that's one thing I really want people to know. It's like, healing from trauma is not about reliving it. And it's definitely not about like, oh, my trauma is harder than yours. And let me tell you how awful it was, because then you're literally re-traumatizing yourself. You're not healing, you're reliving it. Exactly. So, but it did help to know like that she could really understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The effects of sexual abuse are so long-standing, right? So you're now a trauma survivor. And I know from my own journey, that's right. It's not just something that, happens to you, you get, and you'll get over. You end up learning to live with. Tell us a bit more about that. What is it like to live with? Because otherwise you've got to live with it, but there's positives and negatives of that. And I know your journey has been, right, suicide attempts, addictions, you can live with it in a very bad way or a very positive way, but it doesn't go away.
Right. That's a really good way of putting it, Annie, because I think there is a misconception that, and especially if you haven't been through it, that you should just like get over it,
Yeah.
and it isn't like you stubbed your toe, it's not like you were in a car accident and it's just like, okay, I'm just going to get back in my car. Childhood trauma and sexual abuse affect the whole entire self, and it affects your nervous system, so your nervous system becomes hypervigilant or hypovigilant, where you're either completely depressed or the opposite, you're constantly anxious, and so you're walking around your whole life basically until you learn how to manage that change, feeling like you're going to be sexually abused again. Your nervous system, you're hypervigilant, you're anxious. It's a horrible way to live and feel. And in addition to that, it really impacts what you believe about yourself, because when you're young, you don't have internal language. You only know, you automatically, your brain literally takes in, records the way you're treated as this is what you're worth. And so you lose your sense of self, you lose these opportunities that you might have to develop your talents, to get to know yourself. You lose your innocence. There's a great deal of loss of self, the shame that becomes, almost unbearable. And it's a pervasive sense of, it's kind of like being on high alert when you can't function necessarily. All you can do is survive. And so, it's literally a physiology thing of the brain. When you are in a hypervigilant state, you stay stuck in your brainstem, and when you're in your brainstem, that's the only part, the only thing you can do from that part of your brain is survive. You're not going to learn to prioritize or be flexible or, connect with people. You're literally just stuck surviving. And those same tools that helped you survive through the trauma are the same ones that are actually going to hinder your growth if you continue using them in healing, when you're healing from it. So trauma, especially repetitive childhood trauma, really impacts, everything from head to toe, mind, body, and spirit.
Exactly. It's good. It certainly does. And that's right. Staying in fight or flight, pretty much.
Right.
In a permanent, that's great for the emergency situation. But over time, it's just burnout.
You're not living in the emergency situation anymore,
exactly.
Right? Your body thinks you are, but you're not, and that's the for you, there was, several years where I was just scared to death to even like go to the grocery store, and my body just kept feeling like I'm going to be raped, because I had an abusive ex-husband, and in addition to the other trauma. So, it isn't like something that you talk yourself out of. That's the other thing that I think people don't understand when it comes to healing from childhood trauma and sexual abuse. You really need experiential therapy or experiential work, because it's not the body keeps the score. I don't know if you know that book, The Body Keeps the Score, by right. And so we have to learn how to get back into our bodies. And if we are constantly just talk therapy and just cognitively talking about how awful things are, we're not having a chance to change our physiology. And I think experiential trauma, I think that's why it's important to have a close personal relationship with God. One of my favorite books is The God-Shaped Brain, by a psychiatrist named, I think, Timothy Jennings, I think his name is. But there's like changes that happen when you can integrate that into your healing that don't even require the actual trying. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay. I'd love you to talk through that a little bit further, because that's it. Usually you feel that you need to go, to a therapist, a psychologist, psychiatrist, and talk through the trauma and your response to that trauma, and imagining yourself there being more powerful and saying no.
Right.
Yourself. So it is all very cognitive based, right? And so talk us through this other therapy that has helped you then. How is it so different, and how can your body sort of reinvent, or recirculate its patterns of behavior without the cognitive aspect?
Well, I mean, one of the and it's funny, like I was in therapy when I tried to kill myself. So I kind of tell myself, you have to think about, if it was working, I probably wouldn't have ended up like that. But I really believe that when it comes to healing trauma and childhood trauma and sexual abuse, it's really important to for me personally, but I would think others would agree because I've seen it, is it's called experiential therapy or psychodrama. Okay. So there's even it's a TSM model by Dr. Kate Hutchins that some people use, but it's a therapy where it's like I said, it's like psychodrama. You're experiencing it. You get to like switch roles. It can be a lot like Gestalt therapy. So, but you're basically learning. In addition to that, you're not like just talking. There's a lot of it's integrating like the experience, but not like going back to the experience necessarily. And I would say like EMDR is another type of is another really good modality for healing childhood trauma, and brain spotting, things like that. But they're very, very helpful because you're actually kind of rewiring in a way, the way your brain works. But it's also important to have that body piece. And like one of the first things that a therapist did for me several years ago was told me to stop with the mindset stuff. Like, because I really believed like if I could change my thoughts, I'd change my life, blah, blah, blah. And then if I wasn't changing my life, then it felt like it was all my fault, right? So I must not be trying hard enough. And so she said to me, all I want you to do is get up in the morning and write in your journal how you're feeling. And she gave me this big feeling wheel with all these different feelings. And she said, I want you to write down where it is in your body and how you experience it in your body. Don't try to talk to yourself about what you're thinking, none of that, just write. So, and I was like, oh, okay. And it was really amazing to me, the power of just going, oh, I feel sad or afraid. And I feel like my one of the things I noticed was that I kept a lot of my energy, a lot of my negative, anxiety in my jaw. Like I would notice that when my teeth were clenched, right? And it's funny, and when you actually start doing that, you actually take your body out of your brainstem and move it up into the other parts of your brain without going, oh, I better breathe. Let me think about this. There's lots of different ways to do it, but I just think it's absolutely essential to get clients back into their body, because the body is the one keeping the score. So, I could I could tell myself all day long, I'm safe. But if I can't, go, oh gosh, my shoulders are up near my ear, or my hands are tight, all of a sudden, when I can do that, I'm actually shifting in my brain to a part where I don't have to literally go, no, I'm safe, no, but really going, oh, it's calming me. But I think that cognitive behavioral therapy for trauma doesn't do much, because it doesn't work on the integration. If you're literally talking about the trauma over and over, or you're just talking about your day-to-day life, you're not necessarily going back to like the root of why you might still be struggling today in relationships or work or whatever. Does that make any sense?
It makes total sense. And I know that, when I went through therapy following abuse, is very much like talking is helpful in a way, but also it was the big revelation was actually, that's therapy too, actually. Well, where are you feeling it in your body? Getting in touch with the impact of it and where it's actually sitting, and that's going to be different for different people.
Yeah, it's amazing how the body really does keep the score. Like I had back pain for 6.5 years where I hurt so bad that it was awful. And when I started really like journaling about some of these things, I haven't been to the chiropractor now in, I don't know, 5 years or something. Like it's amazing when you can really, express it and give a voice to the pain, the feeling, sadness, grief, anger, whatever it is, fear, shame. All of a sudden it has an expression other than being stuck in your body.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other aspect is actually just learning to appreciate the different emotions and that they're all okay. I think that it can still fit positive mindset, because I'm all into that. But actually positive mindset isn't that everything's positive. When you're dealing with these types of issues, it's not positive. It's all right to go, this is really sad. This is very depressing. This makes me really frustrated. This makes me really angry. And being comfortable to actually confront the emotion and to deal with emotion. And so I understand what you're saying there of actually just sitting in those emotions and just recording rather than fighting them, responding them, just actually becoming aware of them. I think we're very quick to suppress, because when you're feeling like you're already the problem, and we'll go on to this now, that feeling the crazy one, why am I the problem? And then you then don't want to have any other problems. So the way to do that is just to pretend you're happy, or to pretend everything is fine. And whereas it's all of those other emotions, which are completely understandable, that
absolutely
need to then be part of the mix. So then you can then do other work to turn them.
They don't become so like horrible. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
When you learn that you can manage them and they don't have to manage you, they don't become so scary anymore. You know, and I think, like you talked about being crazy, I think one of the biggest struggles I had was that very fear that somehow anything I was doing, or somehow a therapist was going to say to me, or someone was going to say to me, you're just crazy. And, and if I was feeling these things, then it meant I was crazy. And what I learned, no, like I can feel happy, sad, excited, bittersweet, whatever it is, I can handle them and they're okay. And I can feel one emotion and another at the same time. All of a sudden, like scared didn't become terrified. Anxiety didn't mean panic. It was like, okay, I'm feeling anxious, like my shoulders are up, all this. But okay, you know what? All of a sudden, I can handle it. And it's going to be okay, because I'm not fighting it anymore. It really does make a difference when you can get curious, instead of frightened.
Exactly. When we're in that reactive state, that's right. It is very easy to be frightened. And anyone frightened will, it takes over their whole body. It makes you, just want to retreat. It makes you want to move away from everything that potentially could be, assumably a positive experience.
Right, exactly. And even the healing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's just, it's the funky dynamic of the very thing that I need to help me heal is also the thing that I'm afraid of.
Yes.
So it's like, come close, but stay away kind of thing. And if you kind of just gently make space for these things one at a time, all of a sudden you really, it becomes, a much easier progression of kind of opening up.
Yes, I think so. I think for some people it's kind of like, we'll just take the step, but it's not just one step. It's such a massive leap, and it feels like you're going to be leaping into a chasm, like it's like I leap, I'm not very sure that I'm going to get to the other side, because the divide seems too big, right? When you've got
that's a good way to put it,
which is paralyzing. So it's not as if you're even, it's sort of light in your footing. Everything is heavy and it's scary.
Yes,
overwhelming. And so it's not as easy when people sort of say, but well, why can't you just get over it, or just take a few steps, or see a therapist for a few times and then deal. It's definitely not.
It's just a new way of training your body, mind, and spirit, really. I mean, I remember my therapist used to say to me, we need to take the old record off. You got that, because the way your parents, or your caregivers, whoever they were, growing up, with how they speak to you becomes your internal language and your internal beliefs. And so, that's a challenge to even look at, because early on, I know I was afraid that if I even looked at them, that I might find out that they were right. I'm just a crazy, shameful, slutty loser, and that's not, and when you can start to see yourself as wounded instead of crazy or shameful, then there's this little space of there's like perspective of like, oh no, wait a minute. I'm not crazy. I'm wounded. I needed love. I needed unconditional love. I needed care. I needed empowerment and encouragement, and I didn't receive it. So my body's and my mind, my spirit are responding to that. So I'm just going to learn something new, and that was something that really helped me see myself with compassion instead of shame.
Yeah. It's all going down to that self-worth. You change.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh, it's like
language of going, well, if I'm not worthy, if I'm the problem, then then I can't see it in a different way. Whereas once you actually go, no, we're all worthy, we're all beautiful creations, and what has happened to us is not just not fair, it's completely repulsive and not okay in any way.
Right.
I am not, I am a victim, but I don't need to act the victim. I don't need to be the victim. And so once you then make that step to go, that's right. If I am therefore a person of worth, then how do I suddenly see myself in a different way? And that's going to require a whole new narrative in my self-talk, the way I then talk to myself first of all, and then allow other people to accept words that other people say.
Yeah. And it is really a lot about self-worth. I totally agree with that, Annie. That's why I think that you can't say to somebody, why don't you just get over it? It's like saying to somebody, why don't you get in a Mack truck and drive full speed ahead in the wrong direction on a highway? Because that's what it feels like for us. You know what I mean? You think you're a loser and you just I can't, you can barely even be a self. I used to say all the time, I didn't even want to be a self because I hated the self I thought I was. So it wasn't even worth doing anything for this self because I just hated that self, and so when you can really see it differently and see yourself as wounded and worthy, and that your worth isn't attached to how you were treated, that there's way more to you. Even when I've done the map of the different roles in my life, and it was when my therapist told me several years ago, when suffering happens, it means we're stuck in one role. And so I did this map of my roles. I'm a mother, I'm a pet owner, I'm a coach, I'm a child of God, I'm a wife, I'm, all these different, things. It's amazing, all the different roles. But when you get stuck in okay, I'm an abuse survivor, but I'm not a victim. You know what I mean? So it's you can have more than one role. And when I started to see so much more of myself instead of just being a victim, I was just oh my gosh, wow. Because she said to me one time, do you know that everything you talk about is related to your sexual abuse? And I was like, oh, really? And she was like, I want you to do, that's when she had me do it. And I was like, oh my God, I never realized I was only making space for this horrible thing. I wasn't making space for, all this other roles that I had. And so I really just was like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. And then I really, my eyes started opening up about the different talents I had, who I really was, all the different parts of me, how it was only a part and not the whole. And I got stuck in being I went from being a poor me, I'm a victim, to I'm a survivor, and I'm a sexual abuse survivor, and everything is about being a sexual abuse survivor. So I was still making everything about my trauma, even though this time it was oh, I'm a survivor. And when I was well, that the survivor's a part, the victim's a part, this is a part of me, these are all of my different roles, I was really able to experience all of me and see myself for so much more than just what happened to me.
I think that is an incredibly important point for those listening in to this conversation, that's right. It becomes your all because you see it through that lens. It just becomes, bigger and bigger and bigger. And although it is huge what happened to you, it's not you, it's not who you are, it's not all the elements of you. And then that's right, when you actually then almost give it a percentage, instead of it taking
that's a really good idea
of your oxygen, how about we then go and say, all right, well, for a while, how about we even just tone it down to a 50% and then a 30% and then a 10%, and then one day it might be a 2% because I still live with it, but it's not all who I am. That's right. Because while it's taking up that energy, that oxygen, that emotional and physical energy, and just time thinking.
It's exhausting.
And then you then got, you then freed up space for other things. You can't, it's just we can only manage so much. And so while that, and no one can see that, you kind of go, well, why am I so exhausted when there's nothing to show for it? But it's because it's all just in your head.
Your body is just literally going, you are being abused. And you're just
which is why we often
all day.
Exactly.
It's
why you often do turn to drugs and alcohol and other things to numb that pain, but then you don't get any more productivity around that. You get more problems. You then, get less opportunity to really see the essence of who you are, because you then sort of further suppressed.
Exactly. You suppress that. You suppress, when you suppress the pain, you suppress everything else.
Yes, exactly.
And I love your concept of the idea of space, like there is room for more than one thing. And when you can really do that, it does make a really big difference. And it's, I'll never forget, I can still see where I was sitting in my group therapy when she said that to me, and I was like, oh my, wow. I had gone from one end of the spectrum to the other, and making space for other things really was just like, wow, I had forgotten that there was anything else in my life or myself that didn't have something to do with trauma and abuse.
Exactly. Whereas you are not your trauma,
Yeah. I was just
feel like it is, but you're not.
Yeah. I went home that day. I jotted like all these different things about who I'm creative. I'm this, I'm that. I made this long list of like all these things about me. And I just read them aloud like every day and was like, enough with that. I can be a trauma survivor, and I can also be creative. I can be, a child of God. I can be smart. I can be resilient. I can be all of these things. I'm not just that.
And I think exactly, excellent point. You're not just that, but also it's then, well, how am I going to be those things? So that's where I approach it from a perspective of freeing up time and energy, because I can, I am creative, I am innovative, I am kind, I am generous. But then for me to be those things requires me to get out in society, mix with different people, be brave enough, try new things, be prepared to fail, accept a bit of criticism, accept a little bit of discomfort. And if I can't accept discomfort because I'm already overflowing with discomfort, if I can't go out and try new things, go for new jobs, start a new business because I'm terrified of, being criticized or failing or sense, that, shame of, I tried and you can't cope with one more nail on the coffin kind of thing.
Yes.
You're not, you can say all those affirmations, but you can't be, which is why I feel that you just go, okay, well, for me to first step, I think for those listening in, is to actually realize that you are all of those other things. And then now the next journey is to then go, okay, if I am them, how do I then be that? And what's going to have to go? That's right. It's going to have to be that sliding scale of, okay, I'm going to tone down the amount of time and energy. I can still do a bit of that because I'm used to it, but I'm going to just sort of change the it's almost like a pie chart if you actually look at it.
Exactly.
Because I'm then going to go, okay, well, I want to spend time being, going to, having my faith and having that time, having there with a partner, maybe being there as a mom, being there, in my work role. And those times I'm going to make a decision that I'm going to have to go, I'm not going to entertain those thoughts. And that's where a lot of the work goes, getting it out while you're being, because then suddenly as the joy, which is what you're about, once the joy activates in those new spaces, that will then help you, really put that lever back down to it.
Yeah, it does. And the more you
cream 1 or 2%.
And I think like the more I started stepping out, and I'm not going to say I stepped out and I wasn't afraid. You know what I mean? There were times when I would like shake in my boots practically, but I would be like, okay, this is different. I'm doing something different. Being afraid isn't bad. I can handle the anxiety. I can handle, this is something new like that, like you talked about earlier, making the fear okay. Like it's okay to be afraid. I'm doing something new. I'm being really brave. Of course I'm afraid. That doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I'm anything. It just, you know what? And then you go back to your body. Okay, I feel the fear here. I feel that. And there are times when I will literally imagine tucking my little feelings with me in my car, next to me in the car, in the passenger seat. And I'll be like, all right, everybody, we got fear, we got anger, we got a little shame, we got hope. And then, you just be quiet for a little bit. You're here. But it's like, and really being like, okay, now wear this in my body, and then going to do the new thing, and then all of a sudden you start to realize, oh, I am making new connections. I am making new friends. I'm actually doing things I never thought I could do. But it doesn't, and then you start living, and like you're talking about being in those roles, being present with, your children, or, watching yourself develop those talents that you're like, I always knew I wanted to do that, or I could do that. And it's like, the whole trauma thing becomes like maybe such a smaller percent, but it doesn't take over all the other things in your life. You have space for it, you honor it, you recover it, you nurture it, but not at the expense of being all the other things that you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you mentioned there of sort of disassociating yourself with those emotions. Once you've actually learned to go through, and this is all taking time for those listening in. It's not as easy.
Yeah, it does. It takes time.
Go suddenly put all my emotions in a jar. But the concept of this is really powerful. And I'd love you to talk through a little bit more about how to go about that for those listening in, because once you've actually addressed those emotions and are aware of them, their impact on you, but you can actually name them. You can appreciate who they are. It's kind of like, you're not my enemy now. I'm going to frenemy you.
It's true. It's really true. They really are like frenemies. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, you're here, but you're not my enemy. You're my frenemy. I get it. You're here to, but I would, this may seem like let me put it this way, not like a horrible example of how I use this, but this was difficult for me, and this is an experience that I had. Anytime I had ever worked out, I had always worked out with a trainer one-on-one, and I was working out with a trainer, and I just loved my trainer, and she had to shut her business down because of COVID. And so I was like, it's important for me at my age, and anybody's age really, to incorporate working out, in my recovery program. And I was like, oh man, I think my only options are going to be like group classes or something. And I mean, I have to tell you, even my 18 years of recovery, I was like, I didn't want to go. I was like, you feel, and all these things, and I knew I could get myself lost in all of the thoughts, but I was like, okay. And I was thinking to myself, they're going to be younger, they're cute bodies, here I am, I'm older, I don't want to do this, everybody is going to look at me, and I said, okay, let's get out of my head. And I literally went, okay. And I stopped, and this is what I did. I do this whenever I'm really struggling, and I'll be, or even when I feel activated at all. And I literally stopped, and I said, okay, like, where is it in my body? I was like, okay, I noticed there's tightness in my shoulders, my shoulders are up near my ear, I feel kind of a little bit of rumbling, like in my stomach. I noticed, that my jaws feel a little tight, okay, what am I feeling? And I just was like, okay, we have fear, we have anxiety, we have some nervous, we actually had some hope, which I think is interesting. When I was really paying attention, I was like, this was going to be an hour-long workout for me, and I had only been working a half hour, and I was really, really wanted to like lose weight. And I thought, that little hope showed up going, hey, this might get you to that place, right? So I was like, all right, we see you. You just sit down there and you be with everybody else. But I literally was like, okay, I'm feeling this in my body. I could tell myself, I managed, just by feeling it, I managed to calm down. And I said, okay, I'm not going to now go forward ahead going, okay, I felt my feelings, I'm ready to go. I was like, I really need to bring these guys with me. And I got in my car and I thought, okay, everybody, you guys sit over here. And there you are. I see you. We're not alone. I got you. And I just kind of went, but I didn't feel like I was alone. And I didn't feel like I had to go, okay, I felt better now. Now I'm going to move and go, because all of a sudden I would have felt angry and afraid and anxious again. So I was like, listen, we're all together. We're going to go do this. And I went, and I actually ended up joining, and I've been doing it for, a while now. And I'm really grateful that I did, but it really was, it was a very uncomfortable thing for me to do. And it's pretty much, whenever I do anything new, I'm really trying to like make my feelings very concrete somehow, not just like feeling it in my body and then thinking now I have to go do it, because then I kind of feel like my feelings in my body are like, did you forget about us? So then I can get, my body can get activated again. But when I'm like, no, listen, you're all safe with me. Come on, let's just go and do it. I'm going to attend to you guys after. We'll check in after, and I literally got in my car after and I was like, hey, like that wasn't too bad. Really kind of addressing my feelings and checking in with them after.
I think it's just learning to master your emotions, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. It's actually saying, no, I am the master of my emotions. I will know you. I will deal with you. I'll put you where I, want. And if it's there that you're, it's being able to unpack them, know them all individually, put them somewhere. And then eventually you don't even need to carry them around. And
right. Yeah. I mean, it's
exactly seeing their impact in there, or, and then some of them you go, yeah, you've added no value to me. Like, for a year now, I'm actually going to even flick you. I don't need to do that. So it's all a journey, right? So those people who are on that journey, and then they'll reach out to you, so someone who has, suffered abuse, whether it was childhood or, more recently, and then they reach out to you. What is that? What programs do you have to offer them? How does that work? What's the first step?
Sure. Well, the first step obviously is to go check out my website, which is GinaRolkowski.com. And that's GinaRolkowski.com. And you can, there's a couple of ways you can, it's not easy to just all of a sudden, click schedule a free call, which you can, which is one option. But I do have a downloadable free ebook, The 5 Keys to Overcome Abuse and Discover Joy. You can also follow me on Instagram or Pinterest or LinkedIn and see, see some of my things there and listen to some of my podcasts and things like that and articles I've written online. But if you want to really get started with me, the best thing to do is schedule your free discovery call. And that's right there on the front page of my website. And then I will, have a conversation with you, see if we're a good fit, see if, if they're, because sometimes people come to me and they really are in crisis. And I'm not a crisis counselor. So I actually will take them on and do crisis consulting, where I will help them find a good therapist so that they're not jumping from therapist to therapist, help them, find, so that they know the questions to ask, and help them through that process, because that's really hard. And if they're not in crisis and they're, in a place where they can, they're ready to do the work with me, and they're not in crisis, then we go through, it's a 6-month program. And I take them along the Bridge to Breakthroughs program, that is my coaching program that has the 5 keys to breakthrough.
Fantastic. I love what you said there, because if you're that person thinking, okay, what's my next step? It's immediate. You immediately don't want to then go down and share a lot of very personal information with one person. If it ends up going, oh, I'm not the right person for you, then you've got to do it again and again, because they're already exhausted. So I love,
and I've been there.
I always love meeting someone who goes, no, we'll just have that first initial appointment to go, what are your needs?
Right.
Your needs are going to be best served by, a specific expert in a certain area, certain topic, experience, then you want that person. It's about the best outcomes of that person. So
exactly. I just want anybody who reaches out to me to get better. You know what I mean? I want them to be happy, healthy, and live a peaceful, playful life. But if I know what they're experiencing is something I don't handle, then I'm going to help them find that so that they can find it that way.
Yeah. Is it just people who've suffered sexual abuse that can come to you, Gina?
No, I mean, it's complex. It's really more about complex trauma. So I can help anybody who's, if you grew up and you were emotionally neglected, or you were, verbally abused, you were, ignored, you were sexually abused, you were, a victim of domestic violence, physical abuse, emotional abuse, narcissist, whatever that is that impacts, that creates, complex trauma, which is basically some of the things we talked about earlier, all of those things that impact, the sense of self and all these different things. Those are, anybody, I can help anybody with that. Because the healing isn't necessarily going to be different based on how you were ignored or abused necessarily. The pain and the needs are the same. And if you can address them, then you can meet them, so to speak. So it's not like, oh, I only help sexual abuse survivors, or I only help narcissists. It's, anybody who has dealt with childhood trauma and abuse can certainly reach out to me.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I encourage you, if you're listening in and this has been your journey and you've been going, gosh, why am I the crazy one? What's wrong with me? Why do I always feel so bad or so traumatized by this? I know I'm traumatized because it's just not right. It's not healthy.
Right.
It's who I want to be, but I don't know the next step of how do I jump over that little leap that everyone else says is so easy, that for me just seems like this terrifying, gigantic leap that I would never feel brave enough to do. If that's you, then definitely all your details will be on my platform for people to find. So what's the biggest learning? Let's finish our conversation with what's been your biggest learning for you when you're in your moment of reaching out. And that's what we're asking people to do today. It's to say enough of this. I don't want to be the victim. I want to be, and I don't even just want to be a survivor. I actually just want to be me. I want to be me, right? I want to get over that and not let that take up, all of my time and my energy so that I can thrive, right? Thrive over.
Right.
What has been your biggest learning, your biggest aha moment that you could give to someone else to go, if you're in this place, this is what happened to me and this is what the shift was?
Mm-hmm. I really think the biggest shift for me when I was really able to see myself differently. For so long, I saw myself as a loser. I mean, I was so ashamed and didn't even realize that what I was struggling with was shame. And when I really was able to, the more I learned about the dynamics of having been sexually abused and having been traumatized growing up as a child, the more I recognized and learned about how it works, and that everything I was feeling was really normal for that experience. I started feeling such a level of relief, oh my God, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was a very, and when I was, that was really helpful. But the big shift came when I was able to see myself as a wounded, a wounded woman who really just needed and deserved to be unconditionally loved and empowered and encouraged by the people who were trusted to care for her. And because I wasn't, I only did what I could. Then all of a sudden, all the things I did didn't seem so shameful or embarrassing. I was able to have compassion for myself and really be able to take ownership of the parts of me that I was ashamed of and see them with compassion. And that made such a difference in my journey of shame, because how could I possibly be ashamed of this wounded part of me who was hurt? I mean, all she knew was, the different things that I knew, take drugs, sleep around, get scream and yell, all the different things and that's all I knew. So how could I be angry and ashamed of that part of me? And that made it a lot easier to approach the healing because I wasn't ashamed anymore.
Beautiful advice. And it is completely understandable, because that's right. You'll do whatever you think will work. You're just desperate for a solution. You're desperate for something that's going to make you feel loved, feel safe, feel secure, and numb the pain. And, and those other solutions, although not healthy, they do work for a very short period of time before they become complex. And so it is understandable. And if that's your path and that's how you've led, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not crazy. You're actually just desperately searching for a solution. The advice is, for your journey and so many others that I've seen, is that there is a healthier solution. There is a solution that someone can go step by step with you on your journey, can appreciate what you've been through, that there is no shame, that you are loved, that you are of value, that you can be empowered to be this amazing person that you might not even be aware of who that person is yet.
So
when
true.
people go be yourself, they're like, I don't know who I am.
You might be very surprised at what you discover, because it's really, that's a really good point, Annie, that sometimes you're just like, wow, how about that? how about me? And you really do start to realize getting to know you is going to be a really big surprise, I think, for anybody listening. It's not, I'm talking about a really good, like, you're going to be like, wow. I go, man.
Big wow.
I rock. Yeah.
Big surprises. Exactly. And then once you start getting onto that curious journey of becoming, and you get quirky and fun and try things
exactly.
out. And then
yes.
you go, oh my gosh, I love it. I love being unapologetically, quirky and edgy and funny and whatever.
Yes.
You don't have to be everyone's cup of tea. And you just then have this freedom to go, yeah, well, freedom to be, and that's okay. It's all okay.
Exactly.
And that will come with trial and error. It's trying different things, seeing if you like things, seeing if you don't like things that you do, thinking, oh, I don't care what other people think.
Right.
All of those things. It's an exciting journey ahead for people who are just about ready to
it's freedom,
make that happen. If you want a bit of freedom, if you want to just get released from all of these
yes.
that you are carrying around every day that other people can't see, but you
right.
know there, then I encourage you to take a step and reach out to Gina today. So thank you for being on my program.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Annie. It was wonderful to have a conversation with you and connect with you and your listeners. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Memoirs of Successful Women. You can find me at anniegibbins.com, where you can download my free resources, get connected on social, and check out my online magic transformation program. If you love this show, feel free to subscribe to future episodes and, of course, share it with your friends. I'll see you again soon, and until then, happy podcasting.